Hello, and thank you for joining us for this Transcending Ascension Pragmatically segment on mental health and awakening. And we want to take you through a variety of topics in regards to mental health and specifically awakening, because we both find these two heavily tied together. So, Dawn, what do we want to start taking them through in this subject matter?
What I'd really like to get into is basically some of the medical misnomers, the misdiagnoses, the things that get misrepresented and oftentimes like taken out of context as things that they really aren't. And a lot of this happens in the mental illness field and behavioral issues as well, especially a lot of children get misdiagnosed with things. And we're going to get into that. And I do have, oh, right off the start, I want to say, awesome intro. And William is sitting right here beside me, as you know, and he's like, I need to learn to play that. So my son is going to learn to play your intro on his drums. So sometime we might actually get a live performance of your intro.
That'd be amazing. Yes.
Yeah. So what I do want to say though is I'm not a medical professional or am I a therapist. I've seen a few and some of them were weirder than I am. And I am speaking from my understanding of these topics and my own experiences and perspective. I just want to be clear about that before anybody says this was medical
I
information.
never disclaimer anything. Sam did that too once. I don't disclaimer. It's just should be obvious. I'm a YouTuber.
Yeah. No, it, like
But no, well said. It's true. And I agree.
yeah, I myself have been diagnosed over time with ADD, anger displacement disorder, depression, borderline personality disorder. Alzheimer's runs on both sides of my family, as does dementia. Uh, I can actually start off by telling you why I have some of the beliefs I do about things like Alzheimer's and dementia is because of my experience with my grandparents aging and shifting into what was defined as mental illness. And it took me a long time because this happened when I was in my 20s. It took me until probably about a year ago to sit with this and truly understand. But my mother's mother had severe Alzheimer's. And I had a conversation with her when I was in my 20s, and she had a momentary, what they called it was a slip in cognition. But what happened was at the exact same time, I was having a conversation with my grandmother of the age that she was, and my grandmother as a small child. Now, this was very difficult. I was only in my 20s and I had no idea about any of this, but I do believe that there's a lot of things hidden in our language and the especially the medical system. The medical system, it's written in Latin for a reason because nobody fucking understands it. Okay. Um, but they hide things in plain sight. And again, this is just my theory, but you break down Alzheimer's, it sounds an awful lot like all timers, right? Like, and even William mentioned they call them old timers, right? My grandmother was experiencing multiple stages of her consciousness at the same time in one biological vessel. And what sickened me about this experience and has always made me wonder about this is the fact that in North America, and I'm not sure about in Europe, we separate, medicate, and isolate our shamans, elders, and spiritual gurus, really. Because in other cultures, these people are looked upon with honor. They're sought for wisdom in tribes because they can see through the layers of reality, right? This isn't a mental illness. I don't think we have this right at all. And, like I was saying, you look at other like native tribes that when this the person gets into a certain age, they become a wise man, they become an elder of the tribe. They're sought after for information because they're slipping the shackles of this reality, right? And here my grandmother is with a bib on because she's got drool coming down her face because she's so freaking heavily medicated, sitting in a nursing home, staring at the walls, doped out of her head without a cognitive thought in her mind. And then she breaks through it. personalities at once. Like not even two personalities, two timelines. And that's when my interest in this subject matter really kicked off. Not just out of the fact of all the misdiagnosis that I've had over my life, but some of these are serious medical conditions shouldn't be medicated and be embraced, discussed with the person having that's my rant.
No, absolutely. And I agree. Like, and I like the no, I wrote that down, the all time ers. And that is a known thing. Like, death doula is one of the things I thought about being because I've played that part for people I knew that I've had the chance to be there, like when they died or freshly after, but a few when they actually died. And there's nothing like it. Like, it's a whole, you see, and you could feel, especially those of us that's sensitive to those realms and you could feel the difference. Like there was a time where like I didn't feel much of it and it was like, what, they're gone. And then there was other times where it was like I heard music. It was very like African. I saw like purple rivers and waterfalls. It was very, very aligned for that soul, and they were very much into God their whole life. So I don't think that's a surprise why they would willingly step through the veil, right? But not everybody does. So what you're saying with Alzheimer's, like there's something there, anti-dementia, where like they're trying to reconcile this life, perhaps to save themselves the karma in future lives. If they go through this all time, then they can, before they exit this life, think about all the karmic energetic ties they could end up clearing out, because you don't actually need that other party. Like say you have something glitch, that other person there when you work it out. Like you can work it out just with yourself by fully experiencing the totality of the experience. So like the vivid way they go back in memories and fully think they're a child again, or whatever the situation is in that moment, they actually get to release that energetic karmic tie. And thereby when they step it, and that can go for if you suffer in death, there's a bunch of different ways where like you're going to work through your stuff before you move on. Versus just a sudden one. A sudden one, they're probably going to be in a tailspin unless there's some really strong preordained contract there. And I don't, we can only guess it. So, but they're going to jump in, and that's probably usually a lot of the time when you get ghosts, they're more traumatic deaths where they were suddenly murdered or things like that. And they create that energetic imprint, where those that get that time to like go through and release a lot of stuff, they get a more gentle, like a gentler next time, and a gentler in the middle, because there's lots of variations, the hells and the heavens, where we can go in the middle as well. So there's a lot there.
Absolutely. And something that Spinja and I have discussed too is that Alzheimer's is often rumored to be associated with narcissists. And I know like people like you and I are basically hip to the fact that, as long as you're doing like a living life review, you're going to go where you want to go when you're done here. Right. And I honestly kind of just started wondering while you were talking, is Alzheimer's the life review for narcissists because they won't do it themselves. They're that egocentric that they're just, I'm perfect, I'm perfect, I'm perfect. Well, now you're stuck in your own mind. Are you really? Because when you think of most of the people that end up with Alzheimer's, they are fairly ego driven human beings, right? And when it happens, they're stuck in their own loop, their own mind. And I do wonder if maybe that's the only way they would ever do the life review is being stuck in that state.
Yes, 100%. That makes a lot of sense. And their soul themselves could be forcing that back on them because it wants that process to happen. So that lines up completely.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, the word dementia as well. It's another easy breakdown when you think about it. It's they can see into other dimensions. Like I have the opportunity to go into the inner city in Calgary quite a bit with my job. And I interact with the homeless because I actually was a homeless person at one point and I have no fear of them. And they're people just like you and I. And a lot of the time, you can pull them back here. They could be full blown like, do you want a muffin? Yeah, I want a muffin. right? You talk to them like a human instead of an inconvenience wandering the street, and they'll all of a sudden snap back to reality really quick for you as long as you're embracing them with that right energetic field, right? So even people that are severely demented, you can pull them back into reality just by speaking to them like a human, right? I've experienced it myself. I'm one of those people that should not be turned loose in a city because I would give away every dollar I have, right? Because I've experienced the poverty. I've lived on the street. I've slept on the benches. I've lived in a dumpster. I've eaten from that dumpster. It was a terrible, terrible experience. And every time I see one, drug addict or not, my heart goes out to them. And I'm just overly empathetic with them because I've been there, but you can actually speak to these people that are even deranged as long as you speak to them like a human. They will come back from that other dimension because I truly think that's what dementia is you've slipped a dimension. You're physiologically still here, but your consciousness has left and you're viewing that reality but acting it out here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you can see this situation with um if one of our other audience members wants to, is that happening in the volume? Um I'm not hearing it myself, but we don't want any technical glitches. But yeah, absolutely to what you're saying. Is it happening with me, Spinja, or just on? But the you could really segue this because I agree, dementia, and I have Robert Munch, a fellow Canadian. I didn't want to say anything because I don't like to perpetuate, and I would love it to timeline shift that away because Robert Munch was very much a part.
Oh, I know what she's talking about, Robert Munch. And I actually did see an article that his daughter did discuss this. A lot of that has been clickbait. His daughter did come out and make a statement that this was a decision that was made in 2021. He does have dementia, but he's not there yet. Like, he's not getting strapped into the maid chair anytime soon. Like, this is directly from his daughter's social media. So I'm glad I'm the one that gets to
You're up
deliver.
to date. You're more up to date than I am. Then I got old news.
He
I
he
just heard this
actually,
stuff.
he actually was the same thing for me. He was one of those. He was a catalyst in me learning to read. Right, like Mortimer and the No Good Very Bad Day, the Paperback Princess, all of these books, and
Love
that it's so terrible that somebody with such a creative mind is slipping the density. But when you have that much imagination and you've probably thought of everything here on Earth, where do you go next? You know,
Mhm.
maybe his mind has left before his body because his mind is bored of here.
Exactly, exactly. And these are the ways we see it exhibited in end of life situations where I think like we could segue at this point, unless you have more to add into those, but we could segue right now on this topic into schizophrenia
Mhm.
because it is like that except in living life. Like it's not an end of life situation, it's living life. They slip out into other dimensions, and often, usually if they're getting the label of schizophrenia, especially if they end up locked up for it, which a lot of them do, especially in the past, is they're slipping out and they don't understand what's happening. It's why I think we talked about it in one of our last shows. I don't remember what one about. No, I was saying it to David on the last show, but I mentioned it frequently, and that is marijuana. And like people try to link it to schizophrenia and to say, oh, well, it raises your risk to schizophrenia. It's like, not the marijuana itself. Marijuana opens you up to higher realms, and then you might go too far. And that goes for any psychedelic. You might go too far, not be able to handle the situation. And now all of a sudden, you have darker entities that you're dealing with. And oftentimes, those could actually be real darker entities, but oftentimes, or both, because the entities feed off our internal state, is you cracked something in your subconscious, you went too far, you've injured yourself psychically, and these are the repercussions, and they show up in a variety of ways because you can get people that like mainstream psychiatrists will tell you are schizophrenic, but in reality, like they're channelers. Like they'd be just any channeler. And at this point, like millions of people, not millions, sorry, that's exaggerating because I'm so schizophrenic, but I've been called schizophrenic so many times it's not even funny because my grandmother was schizophrenic, full blown, actually heard demons, tried to kill people, not like very successfully, but like she had a little person on her shoulder at some point. Like she went through it all. She was like 6 different people once in a room. It was creepy. Like she had a lot of like stories that like were whoa, but at the same time she predicted the computer in every household before that was even a whisper. Like this is when they were giant machines at NASA. She knew one would be in every household. She knew the debit card. She knew about like stealing money electronically and how that was coming down the pipelines. Like she knew a ton of different. She also told me I should do dinner theater because I used to want to be an actress, and I often think about that. Like, should I still do dinner theater, Grandma? Like, was that a prophecy as well? But like, she had these moments where she brought real stuff through. And if you look, like most artists are some type of schizophrenic or bipolar, because those two, if you look, have a lot of similarities. I think schizophrenia is just that slip further, because the manic, as someone who was bipolar, the manic episodes, because they were very real, especially before Positive Awakening, were amazing. Things would come through. I loved it. I actually stayed in that state and that way of living for longer than I should have, because I loved the manic part so much. It was amazing. I brought amazing things through. But the depressive side is where things would get dark. And then so it's all about balancing the self. And I think if you have one of these labels, if you've ever been told schizophrenia, bipolar, even borderline personality disorder, which I've gotten before, and I think you resonated with that one, Dawn. Yeah, exactly. Those are all, the borderline personality disorder is just an empath that's tired of being an empath. That's not getting appreciated for being an empath. That's borderline personality disorder when you actually look at the finer tuning of the description of what it is, right? And same with a lot of these other things, except you get more into artistry and deeper connections into realms, because we're on a spectrum as star seeds as well, right? There's a spectrum, and you can take all of these labels and find their place on the star seed spectrum.
Absolutely. And I've been writing stuff down as you've been going because I have several things to say. Um, First of all, let's work backwards. Spectrum is one of the biggest medical misnomers going, in my personal opinion. You know, they use it to talk about children and even adults that are on the spectrum as though it is some type of dysfunction, when in reality, you think about the fact that our entire reality is a spectrum, right? And
Exactly.
all the spectrum really is frequencies that resonate and are understood,
And the
right?
law.
Yes. They basically are in the center line of the, you know, if you're not in this frequency, you're in a different spectrum according to they, right? You know, kids that are autistic are on the spectrum, kids that are ADD are on the spectrum. Anybody that's neurodivergent and doesn't fit into this freaking channel is on the spectrum. Well, all the spectrum is just like the frequency, light, sound, or vibration, anything else. It's just a different intelligence, right? That word pisses me off. I'm sorry, because I hear it used so derogatorily, and it's not actually, the word shouldn't be thought of that
No,
way,
I
because
think of it like a compliment. Like, because if you actually do the research on what these things actually are at their root, it's a compliment.
yeah, the spectrum is a beautiful thing. It's what makes reality reality. Because if I was exact same as you and exact same as Kyle and exact same as William, how fucking boring would it be here? First of all,
The
right?
Borg.
And two, nothing would ever get done. Nothing would ever change. Nothing would ever be different. And this reality would just stagnate, right? We have to have that diversity in our thought patterns. And it makes people nervous because there is a very large channel of people that all think the same way, right? But then there's people like you and I and Steve and Spinge and even young William. We are on the spectrum, right? And we think much differently, and we come to conclusions. And well, even apparently pattern recognition is a form of mental illness too. So we're basically screwed, right? Because neurodivergent and pattern recognition, we must need a helmet by now, because like we are so on the spectrum and make people nervous. That's the whole thing.
It's true. It's true. And this is a good time for our first clip on the diagnoses and how they hand out diagnoses and how they treat the labels. But I just wanted to say, and I think I was saying it in our whole group or just to Sam, about titles and labels. Oh, yeah. Sam put it on X and I commented on it. Labels are great when they're pragmatic. when they are pragmatic and they save a conversation. They're condensing information to deliver it. It's not a bias. It's not like a title. It's not for the ego. It's just to simplify a conversation. So for pragmatism. So certain things like the spectrum, I for one, like the title in general for a lot of things. Like I've started actually, instead of like, it's an autism term for me, I've actually used it for like being an artist is a spectrum. Like I'm actually finally letting myself call myself an artist, even though I have no like winning talent, except like I made that robot song, but it's AI. I wrote it. So I can write. But like on the entire thing of being an artist, there's a spectrum and a lot of people can write. So I'm like, you know what I mean? Like there's a spectrum, but I'm still an artist. It's just a spectrum, right? And so when you look at everything in life for your place, it's like when you play a video game character and you have the dials, right? And or even when we look at our astrology and we see this much Saturn and this much Venus, like everything starts to become, or even how men and women are equal, but we have different chips in different categories. Like everything starts to come down to these variances and these nuances. And that's why stripping off the calling it mental illness for a start, that has to go, because it's not mental illness. The whole thing should just be mental divergence, because there's a differentiation. And never forget, in the book series The Divergent, sorry, spoiler alert, they're actually the normal ones. The other ones that are in the factions are the ones that were tailored because Earth had already exploded. Yeah, very much spoiler alert, sorry. Earth had already exploded, and the humans that survived were trying to figure out a way to get the humans to continue to survive in a way where it wouldn't explode again, and they get down to an entire control structure narrative. And it really much overlaid on now, like in the way they try to tell us what to do for our own good and do this, that, and the other for our own good. Where divergence, hello, neurodivergent, they were giving us the answer, and they always do. The divergence, are the true ones. And the Earth is shifting now. This is why they're freaking out and stuff's getting really weird for them. Sorry. Whoa, don't karma me for that. But Jimmy Kimmel was let go. And I've always seen him as such a dark, dark, dark entity. Like I know, like he's so much tagged to him, and I know a lot of them do, but he just like rubbed me actually because he didn't even have talent. At least a lot of the other evil ones had like Tom Hanks. He's got talent though, you know. Like it turns out he's super evil, and a lot of them are. It's all of them, right? Quote quote hashtag. But like that guy was just like, you're not even talented. So to hear that he finally got, the karma retribution, it just shows that like what was normal is falling away, literally crumbling. The tower falls. But with it comes rebirth. And we are that rebirth. The ones that sat there going, what the F is going on with reality? And given all these different labels and even self-diagnoses, because we're just know where something's wrong. And like, what is wrong? That was my pre-life. I knew something was always wrong with me. I just didn't know what. And it turned out we were not built for that world. And our simple mind powers alone, the all is mind and vibration, like you were saying, Dawn, about being around people and changing them with your frequency, that alone, and then us coming into our sovereign discerning power is what creates the waves of change that change reality. So everybody stripping away that label of mental illness and just seeing the variances of what this means for you. Where are your chips falling? Why do you hear these thoughts? What is going on? Like dive deeper.
Absolutely. And you just keep knocking it out of the park. And one of the things I wanted to share with people is when I was 18 years old, which is hilarious because I was already long done school, I went to my family doctor and he had this test in front of him. He's like, can you fill this out for me real quick? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, do you know you have ADD? I'm like, okay, what's that? And he explains it. And he's like, do you want the medication? I'm like, what for? I'm done school. Right. And like, it was like, that's nice. And, for a while I struggled with it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I can't focus. All that, you fall into the victim mentality of your new label. You start to acclimate it as part of your persona. Right. Oh, I have ADD. That's my excuse for everything. But then my life changed a bit and I started working out and I got this job as security guard. And then I got a job as a bouncer. And I realized that I could make my ADD my bitch, right? Because I was usually posted up by the DJ booth. And I don't know if you've ever actually been to the Harb in Owen Sound, but I was up by the DJ booth, and there was a fight that broke out at the coat check, and it was exactly like what you were saying. Everything just kind of slowed down, and I'm like, I need to think right now. And it was Matrix like. I was like, okay, I go there, and there. And all of a sudden, I was at the coat check pulling this fight apart, and Trevor, who was at the door, which is like 15 feet from the coat check, went, "How the hell did you get here before me?" I'm like, I don't know. Right? Like, you can, I actually refer to ADD as accelerated thought processing, because that's exactly what it is. You just have 100 thoughts at once, and you can't really pay attention to any of them until you train yourself to pay attention to all of them individually. But you basically just section it off. It's a mode of thinking, right? You can actually manipulate this disability into a functional superpower, right? It's an ability to process things at a much more accelerated rate once you realize that you can control the channel that you're in, right? And you just like, okay, I want to think about this right now, and you will get every thought about every part of that you could ever ask for in about 30 seconds. You just have to filter them back out, and for me, I have to write them down. But it's where it actually becomes a functional, usable ability.
100%. And I had a very similar journey. And a lot of it came down to, like, I used to try specifics to fix myself. And some things like deep breathing through the nose are like, yeah, right. There's certain things that everybody should know. But for a lot of it, it's just overall improving of the self, just Carl Jung, alchemizing of the self. And that's what like pulled back the layers, and I started to just become more balanced. And then all of a sudden my thinking grew more clear, and that's ever increasing. And that's when all of a sudden ADHD became like a holy, I can see. And then it actually like allowed me to dive into ADHD, like the whole diagnosis of it deeper, which did a lot of good. So anybody like, you don't want to be wounded by your diagnosis, and don't even call it a diagnosis. I do like labels to a point. Like I said earlier, they pragmatically help sum up issues and information. But for me, this information is knowing what it means. So I started diving down and watching just like, you have to basically, in this situation, because I'm usually a book person, but you have to watch kind of YouTubers, because it's so new, and these people are basically, and I might do it myself one day. I'm not into it. They are trialing and erroring their own ADHD life and finding perfect solutions. And one girl I love that I always praised, has actually switched gears. She's got over 1 million followers, the Clutterbug. She's Canadian. And she used to just make organizational videos because she was such a pig. I get that. I had a real problem with very much being messy, but I'm not like that kind of person. But it would happen because that's an ADHD thing. It's really hard to stay organized. Yeah. But she was perfect. She was perfect. And she broke it down like, I need to see all my stuff. That's part of it. She had all these systems to figure it out. And then now she's on her own journey of really realizing, they have conferences now. She's really realized she's ADHD and autistic, because a lot of the time that pairs together, I think all of the time. And she's realized all these things it means. And she's not the only one. There's people that do funny videos about it, but they tell you all these random things like, we don't have executive function. That's huge. And the video we're going to show that Dawn sent over talks about how a lot of ADHD, he says, we're just given the beginner of the video here, he says it's caused by trauma. I disagree on that point, but it's still vital to hear what he's saying, because a lot of us have had trauma. That's a starseed issue. But you can see kids, especially more modern kids, that have like, because kids kind of like, my kids are so dramatic, they can be traumatized by not getting a toy at Walmart. So like, it's hard to say a child doesn't have trauma, but it's a very different level from what we probably know from our past. But a couple of mine, I think my daughter definitely does. My one son's too young to know, and the other one is full-blown autism. But you could see that ADHD exists outside of trauma. That is what I'm saying here. I have seen it exist outside of trauma, not just with my kids, but with other kids. You see it. And just, but I had the trauma. So I can see how it can make things much, much, much worse, because your self-esteem is really low. You don't have to have low self-esteem just because you have ADHD. That just becomes part and parcel because you don't match up to societal standards. You're made to break the mold. And there's ways, because we can do, like you were saying, at the bar or with the situation with the fight, and you stop the situation and you like a superhero, because we can see a complex situation and fixed. But the most basic task of like tidy the kitchen is like, oh, I'll die. Like I just can't, because like you just, not until you get the right motivation. Like my husband yesterday, I was starting another smoothie diet, or another, yeah. He's like, okay, sure, yeah, good day you're gonna have, good day. And because he's just like, it's only gonna be today, it's not gonna go any further. I was like, you don't know what you just did. I was like, you've now given me that dopamine motivation that I will now do this longer. But like we have our own tips and tricks and what works for us, and then such a superpower.
Oh, absolutely. Like, and I just find it funny. Like, it's part of my day-to-day life now. And it's just like, I probably drive people nuts because it's like I never stop talking like this now because I've just kind of leaned into it. And like, thankfully, I've actually run into a couple of coworkers that understand what the hell I'm talking about. Unfortunately, two of them have left, but I still have my one buddy, and like, it's I just have to share a personal story. You caught the weird conversation that me and William were having before the show. Well, just picture two guys in like work gear emptying sewage filled trucks into a cesspool pit, literally discussing the construct of reality. That's not like I couldn't have asked for a better coworker for me right now in the things that I'm understanding and the things that my
Yeah, I
mind
could
are
do a job if they would talk to me like that. I could do whatever. Yeah, I agree.
like. It just seems like I've gotten things to function as well as I possibly can, and I do think a lot of that is from having the accelerated thought processing or functional ADD. Like, it is possible, and it is a wonderful thing once you figure out how to do it. Like,
Mhm.
I've never been medicated. Well, I've taken some of the
Not for
medication
ADHD, yeah.
for nefarious purposes.
Yeah, not for ADHD, but yeah, other stuff. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. I've always wanted to try though, like Ritalin or but I don't want to go because I'm post. I got diagnosed officially by my son's pediatrician. He was getting his autism diagnosed. He's like, oh well, it's no surprise he's this autistic with your ADHD. And I was like, huh? Remind. I was like, what? And he's like, oh yeah. And then he listed off a bunch of things like I told him because they ask you a billion questions. So you just talk about your life, about the happenings, about this and that. And he's like, oh yeah, I could tell because the way I was talking, my speech patterns. And he like listed off all that. I was like, you know what you've just done, sir? Like, what? And yeah, like I had a feeling I had ADD back when it was like ADD was just like you suck, you're a slacker, you have ADD. It was just like it wasn't this whole. But at that point when I had ADHD, I already knew it was like linked to autism. It was like this whole bigger deal now. It wasn't the old ADD. I thought that was just like I didn't. Yeah. Anyway, so whoa, yeah, they just hit you with it.
Yeah.
But he wasn't there to give me medicine, so it wasn't even discussed. And he said it like I knew.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just funny how they approach it. Like, oh yeah, this is a new thing, but you have it. Like, it just kind of was dumped on a lot of us. Is like, here's your new label. Because like I said, I've actually been in a psychiatric ward for depression. I've been like medicated. Like, I took myself off of when they last diagnosed me, it was for borderline personality disorder because they said I had a serotonin deficiency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which basically essentially means I'm never happy, which is kind of bullshit, right? So for quite a while, I was taking venlafaxine or Effexor, and I was literally on the highest dose that you can get at all. And it was such a high dose that if I missed a dose, my mind would go into basically junky withdrawal. I would start to lose feeling in my tongue and in my lips. My face would start to feel stroke like. I got to the point where I know like the first aid shit for strokes. I was like constantly checking myself if I missed a dose because like my neurosystem just shut down without this medication in my brain. And it got to the point where like, oh, the flip side of that is if you don't remember if you took it or not, and that's wonderful with ADD, If you
Mhm.
if you take two, you're probably going to overdose because it was that high of dosage. So it's like, okay, so either feel like I'm going to have a stroke or potentially overdose, so I might be happy. Yeah, I don't like either of this. So I said to Kyla, I'm like, if I go into some type of medical distress, I need you to contact an ambulance because I'm about to do something. Like, I knew if I missed a day, so I didn't know what the hell 2 days was going to be like, right? I've seen junkies go through withdrawals, and this was in my mind, and I was like, oh, this is not going to be fun, right? But it was literally like it was like living what you've seen a heroin addict go through minus the physical sickness, right? It was terrible to be in my body for about 2 weeks because it took
Same,
that long.
2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks, exactly, yep, and I could go one day I don't know if one day would be like, "Ouch," 2 days is when it would get really bad, 2 day if I forgot 2 days. By the end of the 2nd day, I'd be like, "Oh, I must be dying," and then I'd be like, "Oh, fuck my medicine."
Yeah, it really is like they're neurostimulants and neuroblockers. Like they're literally playing with the electrons in your brain
And you
through
know what?
medication.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing though about ADHD to pair this together is you actually do struggle with dopamine. And we had this whole dopamine revelation, but we actually do suffer with making our own dopamine. It's why so with ADHD, and we can have a lot of ambition. So it's actually kind of easily solved if we do it with our passion. If you aim towards your passion, dopamine, hello, your passion. And then you're constantly getting rewards for succeeding, but you have to make it yourself, like making a video. Success, you have to clean off the counter. Success, like that's one of those things these ADHD videos are teaching me is ways to find micro positive successes. Like we talked about dopamine, there's negative like scrolling and getting the hits off, which I can't even do anymore. That's just an ascension symptom. God's forcing me into it. But or there's cleaning or making a video, making some art, whatever. Being productive is going to create going for a walk with the dog, which I did today, which I don't do because she's huge and naughty, but but like it's that positive reward dopamine because we actually I probably linked to our lack of executive functioning do not get the same kind of helping as normies of dopamine.
I I totally agree with that, and that's actually how I ended up into so much addiction myself. Like I was drinking at a ridiculously young age. The first time I got like absolutely hammered, I was 6, right? I have been drinking steadily since I was 10 up until, well, December 2nd will be 5 years. I just was done with it. But like
Nice.
I did everything I possibly could to numb what was going on in here because it was so tumultuous at times. And that's part of it too. Like when before you learn to harness any of this, it's like living in constant chaos. And I
Mhm.
understand it is a strange way to go through reality. And when you start getting your understanding as well, you're like, okay, I'm crazy and I understand the universe. This is just wonderful, right? Because like it really is a strange, like it's like riding two horses at once.
Yes, 100%. Agreed. And I'm going to lead us because your thing with drinking, it ties really. I'm going to play our video about ADHD because it does have a large link to trauma. I don't agree it's 100%, but so
Yeah,
very linked and
yeah.
perhaps cosmically designed. But we'll discuss it after we hear this guy's thoughts. So I'm not the smoothest. Okay, here we go.
Many of the folks I work with seem to have been misdiagnosed with ADHD when really their difficulty with concentration and focus.
Is it playing?
It's playing. The video isn't rolling, but it's playing.
Okay, here, let me see and start over.
Many of the folks I work with seem to have been misdiagnosed with ADHD when really their difficulty with concentration and focus might be better explained by a PTSD diagnosis, post-traumatic stress disorder, and that the original person making a diagnosis maybe did not know about the trauma an individual experienced, or simply wasn't as aware of how trauma can impact concentration.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you go ahead. Yeah, you sent the video. What do you think?
So where I was going with that is actually because of William. They tried to push medication on Kyla, and it was because, oh, he's ADHD, he's ADHD, he's ADHD, he's having this behavioral issue and this behavioral issue and this behavioral issue. Well, the two, I do agree that it's not always trauma, but quite often the two do present very much the same, right? Because when you have PTSD, you at a young age you develop those issues as well, right? I know that, and I'm speaking for myself. You know, I fought every kid I could possibly fight in public school. I was drinking, I was smoking, I was the quintessential Bart Simpson bad kid because of the PTSD. And then, you know, when I was 18, they're like, "Oh, you have ADD." Well, it's like it just seemed like such a new label to throw on me because of past traumas. And I know William got much the same treatment. Like they tried and tried and tried to get him a diagnosis and get him a diagnosis. And Kyla finally went, well, okay, once all of the aspects of what's being done to this child is fully investigated, because I'm not going to get into too much personal shit here on the air, but his biological father is not a very nice human being. Once that's fully investigated, then we'll see whether or not it's ADD or PTSD, right? And that's where I was going with that part of the video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree but they're linked because that's why the one I knew it as is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and that is the ADHD. And this guy's just calling it PTSD because PTSD we know is like soldiers and they flip realities because talk about trauma, and that's still a soul issue though, right? There is still a soul attachment there. You are sucked out of one reality, like we were talking about the dementia patients earlier and stuff, sucked out of one reality and placed back in the last one where you're in a horrible situation of whatever was happening. And those that get panic attacks, like just from their parents, it doesn't have to be war. And you go back to that place and you're acting from that time of wounding, which you see with a lot of people that lash out. And the lower side of what people would think of borderline personality disorder, there's a lot of wounding that comes out there. All of the labels you could call post-traumatic stress disorder having a part in, because post-traumatic stress disorder is just amping up whatever's it's inside. It's amping it up and it's causing it more conflicting issues. So I think you can have the ADHD to begin with because I think it's basically a starseed. So like super really innocent. Your thoughts going.
I'm going to hold space for her. She was just giving the starseed definition of ADD because I think there is a misdiagnosis, and I think like the complex post-traumatic stress actually does make sense. Go ahead. You were giving the you were on number 2.
Ooh, okay. So things that are just naturally ADHD are being imaginative, creative, thinking interdimensionally, thinking of multiple things at once. I think just generally being like disorganized and messy comes with it naturally. But because of the interdimensional thinking and decision fatigue happens harder on us because we can see so many options, because other people don't have these things, they don't even realize it. When they think about doing something, they just thought of one thing. When we think about doing something, we think of 1,000, and then we start thinking about all the variables that go along with each of the varied projects, and that can get people jammed up. And where post-traumatic stress disorder comes in here is because like it could be cute and quirky, the ADHD, if there wasn't the PTSD, but the ADHD plus the PTSD makes that person who's thinking about what to do freeze up and then start lashing out. Why don't you ever make a decision? What? you know what I mean? Next thing you know, they're going nuts because that ADHD mixed with PTSD brings back the trauma because mom and dad were telling you, hurry up, and you couldn't decide. You couldn't find your stuff for school. You were missing the bus. Like all these things come back and fire the nerve, like rewire, refire, Joe Dispenza style, right? So PTSD causes your brain to refire in those old patterns, but you can clear all that up. And that's why ADHD is still there. That's why it's not PTSD. What PTSD does is inflames ADHD's worst qualities because you can have it regardless, but it's going to have, like, if you weren't abused, if you weren't tormented, you should have an easier time, especially once you grow up to be an adult, like I do now, because I've cleared up a lot of my past things. I can imagine I was never abused and be in that place because that's kind of a lot cleared up energetically, which matters deeply. So now I know the experience of thinking ADHD in the way that formulates, but without the freezing that comes from trauma. And if I sense myself freezing, I've learned self-care. I've learned to like spoil myself, make sure I'm getting my dopamine and make sure I'm taking care in all these different ways. Because when I'm taken care of and you take care of the self, then the ADHD can still flourish and just be, and it's not perfect. I have to make sure I hang the keys up and like, you know, things like that. Cause like that memory, right, you could just completely, absolutely black out and forget actual things. People are like, how do you not know where? Oh, cause I wasn't there. Like you say, like you're in your head etherically doing something while your body is running around doing different things. Like you're having, you know, so that's part and parcel of ADHD, not necessarily relevant of the trauma, because you can clear out your trauma and still experience it. It's not actually caused by it, but it's just like worsened and exasperated, and it ties you up. I think that's why they want us to be traumatized. It ties you up so you can't use it as a power. It's like it becomes a kryptonite when it was your superpower, you know?
Yeah. And I like the way that you've separated the two, because there is a lot of people that, you know, the ADHD is accentuated and makes it worse. Like Kyla handed me a note and she was saying, like, you know, she wasn't hyper vigilant until, you know, the things that went on with her parents went on, exactly what you were saying. You know, mom and dad were hard on her, in her case especially dad. You know, that's what made her that hyper vigilant, always on eggshells, and that's why it presents as ADHD, but it's more likely PTSD, because I think that too is a misnomer, like you were explaining, is like ADHD is just neurodivergence. It's an accelerated thought. It's not all these other
Yeah.
side things that
Just
have
like
got.
Asperger's makes a scientist. Asperger's makes you a scientist, right? That's a common thread. Well, we're seeing ADHD people make you a podcaster. They make you creative. They add to the star seedage. Like it has its own flavoring.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think the medical system has done this on purpose. They've highlighted people with CPTSD and went, oh yeah, this is a typical ADHD person. Look how unstable they are. Well, no, the instability comes from the PTSD, not the ADD, right? It really is a separation of two different situations.
Exactly. But we're multifaceted. And that's the thing. Like, I like labels to a point when you're using them pragmatically, but I do not like boxes. And that's why I like the term spectrum. It's not a box, it's a spectrum. Like, the cross is supposed to be the box that our matrix is, but unfolded, right? Like, we want to unfold as much as possible, exactly what ADHD is perfect for. And they don't want that to happen. So, there's a lot of narratives around anything to keep us boxed in. I honestly think it's why they made art so bougie, because they wanted to make it like not for everybody. They, oh, this is $1 million painting. Like, oh, I can't paint $1 million painting. Oh my God. Like, and they just totally, they make going to art galleries for snots. Like, it's like the kind, like, that's the kind of like, I wish I could do that. You know what I mean? I wish that was a more open world, and it is in some cities like New York and stuff, but just for average Joes, it's not like an open and natural thing. So they'll do this over everything is my point. Just absolutely everything, and especially over the things that are probably the best for us.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that is just the function of the society right now, is to like anybody with creativity needs to be made to feel abnormal, or it is like I used, even at a very young age, I built model cars. Like at they're like age 14, I was building them at 7 years old. I could put like an engine together of a Dodge Charger at 7. That's not normal, but we're highly functioning. Like Kyla was always very artistic, but she didn't have the emotional stress, right? And it kicked that more into gear when the abuse started. So there are certain things that trigger the PTSD that present as ADHD, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel so bad. Like I almost feel I was like abused from the start longer than I can remember. And I actually, and this is really weird, feel worse for kids that had it nice, but then shit got worse. Shit got bad. Like they had a good family, and then sometimes a divorce or some kind of situation in probably the marriage happens, or the guy gets fired, or something happens, and then all of a sudden life shifts and it's very bad, and these parents you once loved are now not trustable, and your whole life is turned upside down. Or even just kids that have divorced parents, like you see they have the same trauma level as kids that are abused, because mine was my known reality. I actually didn't realize I knew. And my parents always made it about money. My friends were rich and we were poor, and life was hard because we were poor, and life was great because they were rich and had life handed to them. That was our narrative, right? Where my parents were hardworking, good people, which they were hardworking and they were good people. But their mentality of that language is actually what was perpetuating their poorness. But I had the same thing. I was like, oh, we're poor. Oh, it's not fair. But then once I got older, I was like very quickly and out into the real world, because I moved out as soon as high school was over. I realized I was traumatized, and I realized, oh shit, like I wasn't okay. Like and everything switches. But I'm actually kind of happy that I was raised into it, and so I didn't actually I think it was actually a shield. Who knows though? And so many of these things are the variants that make up our life. We all have these unique sprinklings, which is why there's no mental illness, and keep repeating the narrative we're trying to make in this segment here. There's no mental illness. There's just mental divergence and the ways it falls. And then there's being balanced and unbalanced. There's caring for the self and not caring for the self. There's buying the narratives and seeing the truth. That's where these things come in, because I think Don and I can both agree here that our mental illness fixed itself not by doctors, not by any of the outside stuff, not by whining, not by complaining, and not by acting out. It fixed itself when we decided. For me, it was like deep breathing through the nose. It was making sure I had salt baths every night. It was crystals. Crystals actually helped me a lot early on. It was a bunch of sound healing, self-hypnosis, because your subconscious is 95%. So I get it's a battle, but it's a battle only you can win.
Absolutely. And the only thing I would put onto that, actually, I have used crystals in certain situations, so I can actually say that. One of the most brilliant things, I don't even know where it came from, and I'm sure I got it from somewhere else, is the why war. And you can do it with your emotions as well as anything else in this reality. It's what I turn to when I'm having a difficult time understanding something, and even if that is myself, right? I will sit there and go, why do I feel like this? Well, because of this. Well, why? Well, because of this. Well, why? And if you get in a loop, you've missed the point. And then you just have to circle back and see where the why is again, and then ask yourself why again. And usually it's going to be over something completely inconsequential, overinflated, or completely unrelated to whatever it is that you're bothered about to begin with, right? Because like it really does break down to things in this reality are just, you can actually break them down just by asking yourself why enough times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, David Hawkins taught me that early on. I was actually in this room. I was washing the carpet or vacuuming. I can't remember. I had it going, and it was so good. I had to stop the vacuuming or the carpet washing, and listen. And he was telling about tracing it back, and it comes at the very end as you keep going back, because it comes to an ego thing. But you can even keep going back, and I'm afraid the tribe's going to reject me, and then I'll die. It always comes down to I'll die. May or may not the tribe, but usually it's I'll die. And I was actually overly dramatic with that in my like darker days. I always was like, I'll just die. Like I was always about that. Like I would never survive the sad happening of the time, which could be honestly, I was very dramatic, like losing my keys. I'd be like, I'm gonna end it. Like it would be like, the world's too hard. I can't do it, because everything was very hard, but it was only me that could make it better. So it's really like, and then hearing that when you're in those darker states is enough to make you want to end it, because it's like, well, I can't fucking do this, but you actually can. And that's the joke. And that's why deep group of joke, because it feels like that later, because you actually look back at your old self and go, oh, because it was just so simple as deep breathing through the nose. But like your demons and your entities and your subconscious programmings are so strong in those darker states, regardless of your diagnosis, that you're probably not going to let yourself do it. You're going to have excuses. And I've been with people in their moments and been like, deep breathe through your nose if they're having some kind of tantrum or moment. And you, oh my God, the people will just not. And I'm like, why are you not doing it? Because of demons. What and what other, and I know that sounds schizophrenic, but some kind of negative entity attachment is stopping you from breathing deeply through your nose, because there's no other excuse. Think about it. Just humor me. Prove me wrong. Breathe deeply through your nose.
And further to that, if you really want to activate things, you can actually control the nostril that you use, because that controls the flow of oxygen to the side of the brain that you want to. So if you want that relaxed state, cover your left, because it will suck into your right and go to your left side of your brain, which is where your relaxed state comes from. It really is all about breath. So you're absolutely dead on there.
Yeah, you know what's funny, because ADHD thing, I never remember which is which. So I just do both. I always just go the back and forth one.
Yeah. Like, yeah, this feels good. Oh wait, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Because I know one will make you more creative and one will make you logical. But in that moment, I'm always like, I don't know.
Oh, and I was actually, this is ironic, synchronistic that we're talking about this. I was actually thinking about this today. Is that where we get the term mouth breather? Right? Because if you think about it, if you're not breathing through your nose, your brain is not getting that oxygen. It's not stimulating your neuroplasty. It's not giving you new thoughts. It's not making you creative or relaxed, because you're just existing, right?
Mhm.
And it's almost like a neutral state of mind. You're a mouth breather, because you're not activating the brain. We breathe through our brain, right? This is a fact. So I don't know. That was just something I thought about at work.
I wrote it down because we're getting on the hour mark, and we were going to keep it to that for the segments. But not that we need to rush off, but just for neck, because mouth breather is so powerful, it deserves its own episode. And I'll try to keep this brief. But my sister, weird daughter, is a mouth breather, literally. So we go to a fancy-ish, it's still covered by insurance, dental hygienist place that's supposed to be like holistic. And my daughter goes in, and this was just a synchronicity, because this girl also, because they do a clinic stuff and they'll do a bunch of clinic stuff. Well, one of the things they do is breathing. So it's an actual title, can't even remember it, but it's an actual job now where you monitor people's breathing, because there is legitimate mouth breathers. So long story short, they discovered her nostrils are slimmed. And I knew when she breathed deep, they closed all the way. They completely 100% shut off. So I had noticed that. And she snores since she was a baby. I guess that's not good. People, if your kids snore, get them checked for being a mouth breather or narrowed nose passage. She had both. So she's supposed to sleep with these things in her nose every night, which she doesn't. But we got her braces early. Like, she has braces right now, if people have probably seen. And she's only 9, but she even got them last year. And they had to expand out her mouth, and the snoring stopped. So that right there did a lot. But she's had tons of behavioral problems, and she's gotten a lot better recently. And I think because of that, and then we talked about it. Me and this girl talked so much, because they love me there, because they're holistic and I'm holistic. So they like to actually, they ask me stuff. So it's actually kind of funny. And when I first started going there, I was actually really premium. Now I've actually really slacked. So I kind of feel like, guys, like, I'm not as good as I used to be, because it's been like 5 years I've been going there now. But anyways, we're talked for a long time about it. And because I knew a lot about breathing through the nose, I knew how important it was. And mouth breathers, that we talked that term, and she said, no, legitimately. Like, she had an old man that had problems his whole life. And then she fixed the top. It's the top of the jaw. I think it's the palate or something it's called. And they have expanders, and they expand them. And once they do that, these people actually have tons of stuff in their life that's fixed. It's wild. And it fixed Abigail's snoring, and her behavior has gotten better, a lot better. Still needs more,
Awesome.
but
Awesome. I love that. And I definitely want to deep dive into that next time, because I think that'd be, it's just a thought. And I just have these passing thoughts throughout my day. And I have an intelligent community that I get to ask. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to finish this off and we'll talk a little bit about it before we say an official goodbye. But because it sums up what we were talking about a lot today. And it's a study that the one I sent you earlier, the study that was done showing how they just easily hand out diagnoses and take over complete control and don't really treat people that they label as mentally ill as people. They now become projects, like you'll see. So this was just very powerful and kind of sums it up, because I agree we can be divergent, but it doesn't have to be a problem. And then this kind of thing here shows you how they take your power away when they give you that label. So let's load that up.
A completely sane person gets locked up in a psychiatric hospital, and no one, not a single doctor or nurse, realizes they're totally normal. That's not a sci-fi movie. That actually happened, and it shook the world of psychology. In the 1970s, psychologist David Rosenhan ran an experiment that exposed something deeply wrong with the mental health system. He and 7 other perfectly healthy people faked just one symptom. They said they were hearing a voice. Just one word, empty. That's it. No other symptoms, no weird behavior. Everything else was completely normal, but once they were admitted, something terrifying happened. They couldn't get out. Doctors diagnosed them with schizophrenia. Even though they were acting completely normal inside the hospital, staff saw everything they did through the lens of mental illness. One of them was even writing notes, just taking observations. But the nurses recorded, patient engages in obsessive note-taking behavior. They stayed locked up for weeks, some for months, and when they finally left, not one of them was labeled healthy. They were discharged with a note that said their schizophrenia was in remission, as if the illness was still there, just sleeping. Rosenhan's experiment revealed something disturbing. Once you're labeled as crazy, everything you do is twisted to fit that label. And the scariest part? This didn't happen to just one person. It happened to 8. At 12 different hospitals. It was a wake-up call, a moment that forced psychiatry to ask, are we actually helping people, or just labeling them? Because sometimes the scariest prison is the one you're put in when no one believes you're sane.
Yeah, so that sums it up well. It shows this is why you have to come to the self. You have to treat yourself. Treat literally, like have an apothecary in your house. I do. And it just happens naturally. It's not like I'm bragging. It's just you learn about all of these different things and it comes down like you get favorites. Mine's cayenne, wormwood, clove, like there's so many things and you become your own doctor. And even when it comes to fixing yourself, so if you have ADHD and you can tell it's to William, taurine, just the supplement. It's what's in Red Bull and it's why I'm addicted to, I love Red Bull. But you could just take taurine too. And when I quit Red Bull, because I go in and out, I'm always, but I take taurine instead. And actually it's just as good. It's just not delicious. It's a supplement. And you can take all the mushrooms like the chaga, lion's mane, reishi. There's a few. There's like the big kickers, which are good for the mind. Lion's mane is the best one. So if you do one, do that one. And there's herbs you can give yourself to fix your own thinking. Rosemary, if you have the essential oil, load yourself up. It'll help you think better. Sometimes I'll just put rosemary under the nostrils because it doesn't burn and it helps you think better. It helps you think better. Adding essential oils to your crown just does something that clears out your energy. And then when it comes to just general mental illness, clear out your fields. Entities feed on people that are mentally ill because when you're in lower states and you become kind of spasmodic, that's how I was, so I'm using that term, overreacting, quick to react, mind stories, things like that. Entities, you're going to be a loosh farm and they're going to eat you and you're going to just stay in dark places because you're eaten. But because you won't have the energy to rise, what you do is just salt baths, deep breathing. You can really start small. The simplest of self-care acts starts to signify to yourself that you're ready for alchemy, that you're ready to change, that you're ready to be rebirthed. And there's years, like I was in years of positive awakening. I'm still fixing myself. Like I said, I still drink Red Bull and that's bad.
Absolutely. And the only thing I would throw on that, and it's something I still have to go do, if you've ever seen the movie Limitless, it's about a medication that is invented. And the base ingredient in that, here's a huge spoiler, and I encourage everybody to go out to the health food store and go get it, is theanine. Theanine is a neurostimulant. It's an amino acid that our brains are actually missing. If you look up the chemical compounds for the pill that's actually in that movie, it's L-theanine, caffeine, and there's a couple other things, but the main derivative ingredient is just theanine, and you can get that at most health food stores, and it is a huge neurostimulant.
I've seen it in lots of the products. Actually, what I usually take, I'm out right now for a couple of days. I got to get more, but to sleep, I'll take ashwagandha, and it has L-thiamine in it. Or I can't never say those words right. I really, oh my God, doing the news, like embarrass myself trying to read articles. It's hilarious. But agreed, it does help. And I've taken it. You could take it to help you wake up or go to sleep. So it does both because it just kind of perfects the neural networks. And there's so many things that we can learn that we need. And when we perfect our diets, because I think there's something about the human, because I'm very food sensitive, and I think it helps me bring this forward. The human is not perfected to live here yet. It's not perfect. So every time we're eating, we need to think about it as like a healing potion, because even when you're eating perfectly, you might still have problems, because the air, even the rain, and I don't like to be a doomer, but we do need to always be proactive, because we can't think stasis. Even if we eat well, that's fantastic, but always pushing it and finding those places we're missing stuff and asking. I don't recommend going to see certain people, but you can demand to get blood tests. And if you can see a naturopath, great. Some plans cover it, not mine or my husband's, but some do. And you can use that to help cover it, because it will be like being an American probably, but you have to pay for it, versus it being free. Because you could, if you're Canadian or British or something, go to just a doctor and demand a blood test, and they'll check you for it and tell you what vitamins you're deficient in, because that actually matters a lot. Sometimes you think you're mentally ill, but you're vitamin B deficient, and it can actually, or vitamin D a lot, especially if you're Canadian like us. Vitamin D, a lot of us are, we're vampires.
Yes. I'm actually one of the more tanned Canadians I know, so that's
You are.
there's a whole story to that, and I'll tell you really quick. My oldest daughter once asked me, "Dad, why is it that me, you, Nana, and your sister always have a tan?" And I went, "Well, there's part in great grandma's family Bible of the family tree that has been blacked out. You do your own logic on that, and I'll let you figure out it yourself." And she's like, "Oh." So
I saw that joke in the thing. Yeah.
yeah, that is a 100% true story. I saw that Bible as a child, and it's just black right out. There's like a branch in the family tree that is, yeah, probably somebody that had a very dark tan at one point. So I think that's why I always do.
Interesting. Here, that could be easily Native American. If you think about like what's in Canada, especially for a grandmother for it to be a grandmother, it'd be a Native American, because
Great.
it's very recently we've gotten an influx of others, but up until like 50 years ago, we were very, very white ourselves.
Oh,
You want
absolutely.
to know something funny? You know how Australia is like, they're supposed to be like us, but they went even more woke up until like the 1950s. Is like 1958, if I had to name one. They had a whites only. They had a whites only you couldn't immigrate there unless you were white. Whites only up until like 1958, 68 even. Like it was, and they want to be all woke. It's like someone's trying to overcompensate. Like, because Canada never had that. That was just the way the cookie crumbled.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's strange that still went on, but I've actually heard about that there was still some fairly staunch racism in Australia up until recently.
Yeah, well, I wonder why, if it's in their constitution, because that's just not in our thing. Uh, so that's so funny. And then they wanted to be all woke now. I thought that was like, wow, ironic to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Well, this was amazing. We have some topics for our next segment, but thank you so much for being here, Don, our mental health expert on transcending ascension pragmatically.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, audience, for being here. And we will see you all again next time. Goodbye for now.
Round and round the world we spin. Who knows where we're going? Up into ascension we sail. Pop goes the matrix. Here we stand and here we rise. God resides inside you. You are God, and everything is pop goes the matrix. Children, you are deeply loved. Children, you are special. Never feel alone inside. God lives inside you.